Welcome to 4 p.m. session of the March 20th, 2012 work session for the Board of Commissioners. First item on our work session is a status report for the African American Museum. Mr. DeFebo, do you want to take the lead on that?
Yes, Mayor. So we commission all remembers the city of Bowling Green made a commitment of approximately $120,000 to help front load the establishment of an exciting new endeavor in our community, the creation of an African American Museum. You all approved a contract with them for the use of the funds, and part of that contract required them, when they're ready, for another drawdown to report their progress to you. I believe today we have members of the committee, and the spokesperson will be Dr. John Long. Dr. Long?
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
You'll have to excuse me, I just stepped out of class and my voice is a little hoarse. So, I would like to ask, are there any questions you would like to ask of me?
No questions?
I believe we have a video that we would like to show to you.
We are not makers of history. We are made by history. Martin Luther King, 1963.
In 1802, a small residential community in the new town of Bowling Green, Kentucky, was established around a donated piece of land called Lee Square. Not far from the Barren River, this would come to be known as Shake Rag.
The Shake Rag community was full for about 40 years of my first barber. We had restaurants here, we had grocery stores, barber shops, everything that African Americans needed was down here in this community. And then changes started being made. That's when the hospital and the clinic and different things started to come in. This tobacco barn went out of business, and people started to moving away, and they were tearing down houses, and then the community started to dwindling down. People used to do a lot of dancing down through here in these restaurants, and the people, they'd be dancing, and clothes would be flying, and they said, "Shake him rag, shake him rag."
If you wanted to enjoy yourself, Shake Rag was a place to be on Saturday night. So what is Shake Rag?
Shake Rag could be described as a very thriving, wonderful, safe neighborhood to live in. I say thriving by being self-contained in that there was many businesses there, which was in walking distance, and almost everything that you really needed right in the community.
It's the place you go for education, number one. It's the place you go for spiritual guidance, number two. It was the place you went for socialization. That was Shake Rag.
Shake Rag, along with Jonesville, will serve as home to many over the coming decades and century. From ordinary people who worked hard to make a better life for themselves and their families, to extraordinary people like Ernest Hogan, the father of ragtime music.
Probably the most famous African American that came from Bowling Green, that was actually born here, is Reuben Crowdis, but he's mainly known as Ernest Hogan. There's compelling evidence to show that he developed ragtime music, and it's right around the same time period as other people who are developing it, but he's the first one in 1896 to actually have that posted on a piece of sheet music that was published under his name. So he is credited by many as being the first developer of ragtime music.
In order to celebrate the accomplishments of the black community, the region, its people, and its culture, the Bowling Green African American Museum is becoming a reality. The African American experience in Bowling Green is unique to many Southern communities. During the American Civil War, Kentucky was divided in its loyalties.
For far too long, the nation has struggled with the after effects of slavery and the understructure and the superstructure that was erected to perpetuate that institution. And it didn't seem to me, as I've done the recent reading, that it was intended ever to die out. It was intended just to continue to keep a certain group of individuals in a subservient position.
The workings of the human heart are the profoundest mystery of the universe. One moment they make us despair of our kind, and the next we see them in the reflection of the divine image. Charles W. Chestnut.
I did not realize that we had Civil War soldiers from Bowling Green who were in the Union Army, and some of them were buried in the African American Cemetery in Bowling Green.
Although many families owned slaves, some embraced the new free African American movement, offering their freed slaves items to set up their own households or opportunities to return to Africa to colonize Liberia. With an emphasis on the history and culture of the African American story, the museum will provide an opportunity to experience these stories firsthand.
I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Martin Luther King, 1963.
We lived in communities where everybody in the neighborhood looked out after you. If I did something wrong before I could get home to my house, my parents knew about it.
When Monday morning came and I had to go to school, I had to walk up Main Street. And when I got to the Federal Building, I went left and my friends went right. They went to the white high school. I went to the black high school.
Then there were certain stores downtown, too, that we could go in and buy clothes, merchandise, or whatever was in there, but we weren't allowed to try it on. So if you got home and your skirt or whatever was too small, you couldn't take it back.
I think it's a real tremendous value in knowing where you come from in order to know where you would like to go.
The museum will provide a unique and varied history of the success and growth of the African American experience in Bowling Green and surrounding areas, including Mammoth Cave.
One of the best football teams in Bowling Green before schools were integrated was the State Street High School Mustangs. And they became the national champs, Negro national champs in 1944.
Children, when they ask you, why your mama so funny, say, she is a poet, she don't have no sense. Lucille Clifton, 1969.
Well, my goal is to really capture the life that existed in Shake Rag, which would be, for me, I would illustrate it in very vivid colors, and the mixed media form that I use, which renders a lot of movement, referred to shaking their rags while dancing. The other story that I've heard is that a lot of people in the neighborhoods took in laundry, and before hanging the laundry on the outdoor clotheslines, that they would shake the rags.
Sometimes you gotta let everything go, purge yourself. Because you'll find that when you're free, your true creativity, your true self comes out. Tina Turner, 1986.
History is defined by the everyday folks who wake up in the morning determined to do what is right for them and their families. These stories will come to life in the museum.
Success is to be measured not so much by the position that one has reached in life as by the obstacles which he has overcome while trying to succeed. Booker T. Washington, 1901.
My nickname was Jimmy when I first went in business. I named the barber shop Jimmy's Barber Shop. It was established in 1949. In order for a man to be a barber, you had to go to a school, accredited school, and pass a state exam before that you could be issued a license. I was the first black man in Warren County that got a license from going to a school when I was 19 years old. I didn't have very much knowledge of business, but I did have a good idea what I was getting into and what I was going to do.
The museum will include interactive exhibits, presentations, programs, and activities designed to inspire, motivate, encourage, and enhance the understanding of all who visit. A museum dedicated to the Bowling Green African American experience will fill a void in the community, providing an in-depth look at where the community has been on the way to what it is becoming.
What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Langston Hughes, 1951.
Well, as we know, if you don't have a history, you don't have a beginning. So you have to have an idea of where you came from in order to know where you want to go.
This museum will present new opportunities to do some investigating for people to begin to search out their own histories, to know their own heritage, just like all other people are interested in their heritage. And as I hear that term thrown around, that's an important term here in this region. And so we want to claim our heritage also.
When I walk into a museum and I see the displays and I see the artifacts and I see the pictures and I see maybe documents of how this family got to Kentucky or how the family got to Bowling Green, I think that would be so important to the museum with our museum here, that we bring life to our past.
Come and see. Come and learn. Don't just stand off and say it's not worth supporting or I won't come or I won't do anything. Come and see.
Please help make our dream your museum.
For the benefit of those who may not have the report that we submitted to you, I would like to read it aloud, and then if there are any questions you may have, I will do my best to answer. Mr. Chairperson, to have your permission.
That'd be fine.
Thank you. We're so sorry that the audio wasn't as loud as we would like to have been. Notwithstanding, we hope that we'll have other opportunities to present it and to have it heard completely. This is the quarterly reports submitted for this month to the City of the Bowling Green. In the funding agreement between the City of Bowling Green and the African American Museum, hereafter the funding agreement, several objectives were set forth. The state of the attainment of the objectives was described in the quarterly report for the period October 1, 2011 to December 31, 2011, to the City of Bowling Green Commissioners, submitted January 12, 2012. Since that report, there has been a new development. The African American Museum, Bowling Green Area Incorporated, hereafter AAMBGA, has been recognized as a tax-exempt organization by the IRS under the 501c3 section of the Internal Revenue Code. Given that the funding agreement, the Rote Foundation, in the funding agreement, the Rote Foundation was to assist the steering committee with the creation and organization of a Kentucky nonprofit corporation with 501c3 status, and that because the two objectives, organizing a Kentucky corporation and having that corporation recognized as tax exempt, that these have been met, it follows that there is to be a new relationship between the Rote Foundation and AAMBGA. The relationship between these parties was originally presented as, quote, a relationship of convenience, end quote. so that the project be able to operate under the auspices of an entity that had tax-exempt status and thus be able to enjoy the benefit of that status until the AAMBGA project was able to obtain it. The reports for the second quarter will be prepared and presented to the City Commissioners by the Rote Foundation. Thereafter, the reports will be prepared and presented by AAM in accordance with the stipulations of the funding agreement. The arrangement that the AAMBGA operate under the umbrella of the Rote Foundation is now ended. Funds are to be transferred to the checking account of AAMBGA, which has been established at Independence Bank of Bowling Green. Accounting for and reporting of all transactions of AAMBGA is to be done by its treasurer, Mr. John Lillybridge, CFO, Fairview Community Health Center of Bowling Green. The wonderful relationship with the Rote Foundation, for whose experience, cooperation, alliance, assistance, guidance, and sharing with AAMBGA from its inception, the AAMBGA Board of Directors is and always will be grateful. Though now different, this relationship, though now different, will continue in altogether new ways. The Rote Foundation may look upon AAMBGA as one of its youngsters over whom it had guardianship, coming to maturity and launching itself into the world on its own. Beyond the separation of AAMBGA from the Rote Foundation, AAMBGA is able also to report that it now has in place its first board of directors. The capital campaign has begun. 2 events, a reception in January 2012 at the L&N Depot, and a celebrity roast of Western Kentucky University football coach, Mr. Willie Taggart, in February, provided opportunities for the public to come together and to participate in the advancement of the project. The reception hosted over 100 people and the roast over 200. As a result of these events, pledges, some already received, have come from General Motors Corporation, $5,000, the MLK Commission, $1,000, and cash contributions that range from $5 to $500. Let me make a correct mistake. There's an extra zero after the decimal point in 5,000. So it looks like 5,000 plus 3 zeros, 5,000 plus 2 zeros, please. It would be wonderful if it were $500,000, but it's not. Western Kentucky University's President Dr. Gary Ransdale has made a large commitment to design and outfit a Western gallery for the museum, and there is an increasing number of inquiries concerning the donation of artifacts. The project will focus next on hiring the part-time project director, getting the museum space prepared, putting up the first exhibit. Thank you. Are there any questions you would care to ask?
Anyone?
I don't have a question. Okay. Dr. Long, I'd just like to commend you and the committee. The hoops that you've had to jump through to get from the donation from the city under Rote to being an independent 501c3 are not easy hoops to navigate. And to be able to do it in the amount of time that you have, I think shows the community, and in my opinion, shows the city that the donation that the city made was money well spent, because you're serious about making the museum a reality, and you steadfastly work on that. And so as a supporter of that donation, I appreciate the effort that you, and as well as the rest of the committee, has made towards doing that.
I appreciate those kind words. Thank you.
Good job, Doc.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else? Thank you for your comments and appreciate the report. We'll be putting that in file. Is the video that you showed, is that, will that be one of the programs that you do at the museum, or is that available to put on Channel 4?
I'm not sure we've made that decision just yet,
Okay.
but we will try to make it as much possible available as much as possible to the whole community.
I'm sure that we would be happy to host that on our public government access channel if you'd like. But
Thank you
leave
very,
that
very
decision
much.
to you.
Thank you.
All right.
We'll be sure to make that available. Thank you very, very much
Thank
for
you.
your time and your attention, and certainly for your support.
I'm sorry, and Slim wanted me to remind you that it would be available on YouTube as well. All right, next item on our work session, professional development.
Today, Doug is here to present a revised proposal to provide a different career development program, one that is mirrored throughout the state of Kentucky. We're blessed, as the Commission knows, to have had a career development program for a number of years. We're here to see if we want to mirror our program with the state's program to provide a better product for our officers. I think Doug has a presentation for you all, maybe assisted by others, and in your packet is a revised memo through me to you all. Doug?
Thank you, Mr. DeFebo, Mayor and Commission. Appreciate you all letting me be here today. We want to give you an overview of sort of where we have come from and where we would like to go on this particular issue. And I do have a couple of guests, both Major Jim Hyde is with us today to help in the presentation, as well as Joe Bolt from the Kentucky Law Enforcement Council to help guide us through the direction we would like to go. Let me apologize in advance, and I apologized yesterday to the mayor who was at a presentation. I am suffering, like so many people, from allergies and or other head sickness, so if you can't understand me, and I'll try to limit my comments, but if you can't understand me, please ask me to repeat, if you will. In 94, late 94 and early 1995, Chief Gary Raymer had the foresight to have the wisdom to help propose and help develop a career track program at the time, and we refer to that program now as the Advanced Police Officer, Master Police Officer, and Advanced Dispatcher positions. And those were really designed to reward things such as education and career experience and training and involvement in community, and a number of other things, and special assignments. And really that program, by all accounts, was ahead of its time in terms of developing those kinds of programs within the law enforcement field. Certainly the program itself was ahead of its time, and we have used that and implemented that program over the last 16, 17 years, I think, with a great deal of success. But in the interim, the state also saw the wisdom to develop a statewide system that applies to all law enforcement officers statewide and all dispatchers statewide if they choose to participate. And that program was developed in, I believe, or legislated in 2002 or thereabouts. And we have, frankly, taken our time to adopt it to make sure that it's a program we like, to make sure it was a program that was going to remain in place and largely unchanged. And we now have the confidence both in the program and in the management of that program to believe that it can now provide a more suitable foundation for the doorway to the APO and MPO. Currently we use a point system. That point system was developed internally. It's a good system. We've tweaked that over the years to allow for additional points for various things. But we see some value in participating in the statewide program as the entryway into the APO and MPO instead of our internal point system. There's also some recruitment advantage that Major Hyde will talk about in that. And we feel like we can do this in a way that doesn't create disincentive for the current employees and in some cases very much an incentive to current employees, but also an incentive to future employees. So with that being said, there's two parts to what we would like to discuss. Mr. Bolt's going to come forward and talk about the program generally and try to give you some information about how the statewide program works, and then Major Hyde's going to come forward and talk about our program proposal specifically. And then we will ask for your comments and hopefully get your support to move forward with adopting a new approach to how we qualify staff members for the APO, MPO, and ACO positions. So I'll ask Joe Bolt from the Kentucky Law Enforcement Council to come forward, please.
She's my technology here. I'm not. So she, by the way, is Elizabeth McIntosh. Elizabeth works with me at, in the Kentucky Law Enforcement Council in Richmond. She can answer as many questions, if not more, about this program than me. She's been working alongside me for many years now with the program. Just to give you a quick introduction, I'll be as concise as I can. Kentucky Law Enforcement Council, as referred to earlier, adopted this program in 2002. In 2003, we launched it throughout the state. It is KRS. We have our own KAR, so it's here to stay. It's a professional certificate program that's based upon those three requirements, which are training, education, and experience. The purpose of the program is to provide organization and structure to the training process and to the career progress of employees. It's much like obtaining a college degree. It's very intentional and very concise in terms of what an officer would have to do training-wise in order to receive a certificate. I don't know if most of you probably know who Yogi Berra is. He's one of my favorites, and he says things sometimes that you know what they mean, but they don't quite make sense. But if you don't know where you're going, you'll wind up somewhere else. And this program helps people to know where they're going over their careers as law enforcement officers. Once again, very concise, very pointed direction in terms of training that we have here with CDP, Career Development Program. Now, as mentioned earlier in the first slide, we have three requirements, and they're all separate. They all have to be met. You can't replace one with the other. Let me go over a couple of points with each of these. First of all, training. The training has to be KLEC approved, 99.9% of it. Sometimes, on very rare occasions, we will have an equivalent from a law enforcement school that we recognize, that we know the instructors. We've worked with them over the years. We know it's a very good school like IPTM down in Florida, which any law enforcement would know about that. Sometimes we will allow a course like that, even though not certified by KLEC, but maybe they have been, maybe they skipped a year in that particular course in being certified, but sometimes, on very rare occasions, we'll allow a course to go through to apply for one of the certificates. But as I said, 99.9% have to be KLEC approved, and that requires the school as well as the instructor to come to the council, which we have council quarterly meetings, and present the objectives and the curriculum in front of the council, and which is made up of 16, 17 law enforcement professionals around the state, and get that particular curriculum and instructor approved before we will certify it. So it's a process to go through that KLEC approved process, and it's something that we don't take lightly. The second thing about training is that the training course that an officer uses toward a certificate can only be used one time. Much again, just like a college degree, you can't take the same course over and over and get a bachelor's degree out of it. You take that course one time, then you move on to other courses, and that's what we have here. An officer, once they use a particular training course for a certificate, they can never use that course again for another certificate. They have to receive additional training. And then the third thing, which I'm going to explain here in a minute, are skill development areas under our training, which don't apply to all the certificates, but to at least 2 of the 4 or 5 that we're looking at for Bowling Green have these skill development areas that must be met. The skills are technical, human, and conceptual, and what we're talking about here is a course that is oriented toward teaching a particular skill. A technical skilled course would be an equipment-based course, like a patrol shotgun course or a breathalyzer course, something that an officer must know out on patrol that's very technical in nature. Second skill would be courses that are oriented toward human skill development, and that would be your negotiations, your interactions with people out on the street, interviewing, interrogating, those kinds of courses. And the third one is conceptual, which are leadership courses or higher level thinking courses, such as some legal courses. I think we have a couple of ethics courses that might be conceptual in nature. So each course that an officer would take would have one or perhaps two of those three skills. I'm only allowed to use two of the three, up to two of the three by law. For instance, there might be a course that was technical and human in nature because it taught both. Or it might be a course that's human and conceptual because it taught both. Again, two of the 5 certificates that we're talking about, you all utilizing here, have to do with this. And I'll explain that when we get to those certificates. Education being the second requirement. Education is met through either college degrees or educational training points. Now, educational training points are met 2 different ways. They can either be met through college hours. So let's say the officer doesn't have a degree, but they have hours. So let's say they have 30 college hours. Well, for every semester hour of college, they get 1 point. For every semester hour of college, 1 point. Second way to get education points is off of their training transcript. For every 15 hours of training, they get 1 point. And they can add those to any college hours that they have. So, in order to meet the education requirement, if an officer has a college degree, they don't have to worry about the training points. They just get their training, their education met through college degree. If they don't have college degree, then they have to go through the training points, which are the majority of our officers. Okay. The third requirement for a certificate is experience, and that requires the officer being full-time or telecommunicator, full-time only, no part-time officers or telecommunicators can participate. And then again, not really relevant to our discussion here, but the manager's track in the command, they have to be sitting in a position of responsibility to get those. It doesn't really have anything to do with any of the ones that we're talking about today. So those are the 3 requirements. All 3, again, must be met. Can't replace one for the other. Have to meet the training, have to meet the education, have to meet the experience.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Under the education, does the individual does a degree have to be in law enforcement, or could it be another degree?
It can be another degree. Does not have to be in law enforcement. Okay? As long as it's from an accredited college. Okay? How do we get this to move? There we go. Okay, now let me try and decipher this as easily as possible with those 3 requirements that we just talked about. For the intermediate law enforcement officer, which is one of the certificates you all are looking at, again, education, training, and experience must be met. Training in the blue up top there underneath the title. First of all, POP certificate and 160 hours of in-service training required. Now, the breakdown on this intermediate law enforcement officer, as we discussed a minute ago, is 60% of that 160 hours has to be in technical skill development. In other words, equipment-based type courses. And 40% or 64 hours must be in human skill development. The interrogation, interviewing, communication skills, and those kinds of things. This particular certificate is in the patrol career track. And as you all could discern, I'm sure, that we want our patrol officers to be proficient in these 2 skill areas. They must know their equipment, and they must be good on the street with people. So that's why we require those 160 hours to be broken down like that and specific to this certificate. So it has to be 96 hours technical and 64 hours human. Now, that's the training. So the other 2 requirements, as we just talked about, the education and the experience interact down in the matrix below. Years of full-time experience. If an individual had 2 years of full-time experience with a bachelor's degree, plus they've met those hours in training, that certificate would be theirs if they made an application for it. If an individual had 4 years with an associate's degree and that 160 hours and breakdown of experience, they could also have that certificate. Now, again, we're talking the minority of the officers having bachelor's and associate's degrees. So the rest are going to have to do what? Educational training points, right? As we talked about. Though that's what the numbers to the right up top signify. 95 training points for 4 years. So if someone doesn't have a degree, they've got to go the training point route. With 4 years and 95 training points and the 160 hours of training, they would have the certificate. And as you can see, the training points go down as the experience gets longer. We want to reward experienced officers with having to have less educational points. But we also want to reward those with education by asking for fewer years. So the years go up, points go down, but the years go up. And again, with the college degrees, the years go down, but they have college degrees. So we're rewarding on both ends. We're rewarding experience, we're also rewarding degrees. So that's how this intermediate law enforcement officer works. And if you can understand this, then you're going to understand the other ones that we're talking about. Training, education, and experience. 160 hours of training, 96 technical, 64 human. The years of experience matched up with either the degree or the points. Any questions on the intermediate? Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Tell me again how you would achieve the 95, 80, 65, 50, or 35 points.
Okay. Yeah. 2 ways. Number one, from college hours. Say the person doesn't have any degree at all.
Okay.
And for each semester hour, they take 30 hours at Western, they get a point for each of those. Okay. As it says right there in the fine print, for each semester hour, they're going to get 1 point toward that 95 or that 80 or whatever they're looking at. Mm-hmm. The other way is through their training transcript at any of the academies or DOCJT. Whatever they go through at DOCJT, they're getting, for every 15 of those hours, they're getting 1 point.
Got it.
And you can add those together. You can add Western semester hours to the training hours that are going on at DOCJT.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So that's how you get those points. And that's really the majority of the officers are going to go that direction. Other questions on the intermediate? Okay, your advanced officer, again, in the patrol career track, requires another additional 160 hours. It requires, as you can see, the intermediate certificate. So the intermediate is a prereq for your advanced. So 160 hours for your intermediate, 160 hours for your advanced requires a total of 320 hours. And again, no training course could ever be used more than once. So these are separate training courses that they're doing. The breakdown on this 160 hours for your advanced is 64 more hours of technical training, 64 more hours of human training, and then we throw in 32 hours of conceptual skill, which again is your higher level leadership type courses. We expect our advanced patrol officers who are earning the certificate to have some leadership, to have some higher level coursework. That's why they'd be advanced. The matrix is again as follows there. We got master's degree with 4 years, bachelor's with 6, associates with 9, and then you start with your points in years again if you don't have the degrees. Okay? So to get both of these, the intermediate and advanced, both patrol certificates would require 320 hours total, plus the years, plus the educational points or degree. Questions on that one? I might make one comment too about the beauty of this program as far as the skills go. I've been doing this since the program's inception, of course, program coordinator, and Elizabeth has looked at thousands of transcripts as well. over the statewide. And sometimes, often, really, I'll see a training transcript from an officer that's been going for 10, 12 years, and they're loaded up with technical skill courses. They like technical skill courses, this officer does. He loves loves his equipment, and he loves to learn, and nothing wrong with that. But what you've got now is an officer that's loaded up on the technical skills, which he might be very good at, probably is, but has very little human skill training and little to no conceptual skill training. So what this program does, these two certificates in particular, it forces the officer to take courses in all three skill areas so that they're proficient, well-rounded in all three areas. They're not getting certificates simply for taking one type of course. They have to have hours in all three skill areas in order to get both of these. So I think that's one of the benefits of this program. It does force an officer to become more well-rounded and exposed to the different types of skills that he'll need out on the street. Questions? Okay. What am I doing wrong? There we go. Investigator is another one of your certificates that you're possibly looking at. And unlike the intermediate and advanced, the investigator focuses on very specific courses, which are investigations courses, obviously. The training for that is 200 hours, and those 200 hours, 80 of that 200 has to be in Criminal Investigations 1, which is a DOCJT. We formally call it Basic Investigator course, which is your core course for learning investigations. Have to have that course as 80 of the 200 hours. Once they've got that course, or as they've got that course, then they go to work on the other 120 that's needed in investigations. And those courses are identified by KLEC, and there's a lot of them. But again, very specific for an investigator. The experience, you can read there. Actually, it's the same matrix as the advanced officer with your years and your degrees or points. Again, all three have to be met: training, education, experience. I hope I'm not sounding redundant, but I just want to make sure that you do understand that. Questions on investigator? Okay. And then the last of the law enforcement certificates is the Law Enforcement Officer Advanced Investigator. And this requires, training-wise, first of all, the investigator certificate as a prereq, but an additional 160 hours of investigations courses. So by the time an officer would have both of these, they would have, again, 360 hours of investigations training, which is quite a bit. And along with the matrix, education, training points, and years. Okay. Any questions on any of this? I've been that clear then? We use CDP, and this again is statewide for a lot of different reasons and ways, and agencies across the state have used them. Recruiting and retention. I think, as we all know, that when you have a goal, you're more motivated. And I think it's a good recruitment tool, a good way to hold on to officers as they know they can move on up into the track. Yogi says the future ain't what it used to be, because we used to have people that applied for jobs back in my day, and your all's, I'm sure, for some of us, we used to, when we did an interview, job interview, the agency would ask us what we could bring them. You know, why should we hire you? And now it's almost the opposite. Now somebody, an interviewee, asks the agency that. And we use CDP, and other agencies do, as a way to encourage people to join the agency, in that we have the career development program. This is one of the things we can bring to you in order to keep you goal-oriented and motivated and structured in your training. Agencies have used it for planning, for envisioning personnel needs, promotional processes, and pay increases. So, and there's probably several other ways and reasons why people use them, but these are just some of the ways in which career development has been used by agencies across the state. Any questions at all? Be glad to answer or clarify anything. Yes, sir?
Yes, sir. Do the hours follow the officer? Meaning that if somebody wants to come to the Bowling Green Police Department from another law enforcement agency or vice versa,
yeah,
do those hours come with them?
Right. The training hours, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And so my next question, I guess, maybe would be directed at Mr. DeFebo or Chief Hawkins. Does that factor in any way to the pay scale that we currently use, or since this would be what I guess is I've always heard called assignment pay, it would not factor into it?
For my discussion, I'll let Doug answer, but my discussion would be that substitution of this new protocol would essentially place us at a mathematical par in the budget. There may be some, you got to remember, you have new members coming in and getting the pay, then you have members retiring. Our demographic is changing, as we know in the thing. This could have a slight increase in the budget, but it depends on the move of the demographic of the officers. Doug, you want to add to that? If I can handle that correctly?
Because this is really just a different doorway to get to the APO and MPO assignment pay, we don't see it as a dramatic increase in the number of participants in the APO, MPO, or ACO program. We're using this as an alternative route to get there. And so we don't anticipate any significant budget impact at all. It's just we're presenting the alternative as the way to get to the end result.
Okay. Because Commissioner I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Commissioner Stroud and I worked sometime several years ago on trying to create step increases so people not only in police department but outside of the police department and fire department could predict their future from a monetary standpoint. And I just want to ensure that we're now not doing something that sends us back to square one.
Right.
I don't want to relive that.
Yeah, this doesn't change anything with respect to how we're rewarding members currently. This is just a different doorway to get to the same place.
Very well. Thank you.
Doug, just a second, maybe this is for you. If someone comes in and is an advanced police officer, advanced law enforcement officer in another agency, they come in at that level here. Is that the way I
and Jim will
understand?
talk about that in just a few
Okay.
minutes, but our proposal is going to be that after they are off probation, then we would go ahead and acknowledge that, and they would get to that APO or MPO quicker as a result of their already having obtained that certificate. But we do want to obviously look at them through that first year and make sure that everything is okay.
Thank you.
Doug, you answered the question regarding salaries to the budget, but what will this training cost compared to the current training we're doing?
$0 extra, and that's maybe one of the beauties of the program is the higher education, the degrees have always been incumbent upon the officer, although we know that there's a city benefit for education expenses, so the officers can take advantage of that benefit provided by the city to achieve the educational goal. But the training hours that we already send them to, and we already budgetarily plan to send them to, calculate into this, and so we don't have to make any additional accommodation for training hours to achieve this.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else for Mr. Bolt? Do you have any further on your presentation?
This is it.
Thank you, Mr. Bolt. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
I have maybe another
yes, sir.
question about, and again, I don't know who it's for. I'm not clear about if somebody is an MPO now, will they then be classified as the advanced law enforcement officer if this is approved?
No. And I guess so as not to create confusion, our system is not transferable to their system, but their system is transferable to our system. Meaning that if you get a certificate under their program, we would then recognize those limited numbers of certificates that we are proposing as the means to get to APO and MPO. But our APO and MPO does not then convert to anything in the career development statewide program.
I think Jim's going to explain that to us.
But you don't lose. Those who already have the APO and MPO don't lose that status. We're not suggesting that at all. They have already qualified under our internal program and will continue to do so.
I'll wait on it and see what John may just
Okay. And I think Jim will probably have the ability to answer some of those questions.
He has the ability, but will he?
But will he? I understand.
Go ahead.
All right. Anything else for Mr. Bolt? Okay. And
Thank
then,
you all.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Major Jim Hyde to discuss maybe the specifics of how we see ourselves utilizing the state program.
A few of my slides will be repetitive to Mr. Bolts, and I'll sort of zip through those unless you need me to stop. Get a little closer over here. All right. We've already talked a little bit about our current system, and I'll talk a little bit about, pardon me, get that out of the way. The current system that we have for APO and MPO and advanced communication dispatchers based on a point system, somewhat similar to what the state is in that we get points for education, points for training, and points for special assignments. It was established before the career development program, but it was ahead of its time. It was innovative at the time. The points needed to change often because assignments that we grant points for, such as motorcycle unit, crisis negotiator, that kind of thing, those assignments change. So we have to look at those points every year to see, do we have new units that we need to add points for, or have we eliminated units for which we used to add points? It requires constant maintenance to make sure that we're current. The career development system, as Mr. Bolt has talked about, is in the Kentucky Administrative Regulations. It only changes incrementally, and therefore it's a steadier source. We can look at that. An officer can look at that coming in new and know where they've got to be to get to the next level. It's a recruiting tool. What we would like to look at it as, if it goes forward as proposed, once an officer or dispatcher is off probation, then they would qualify for the assignment pay as soon as they achieve the corresponding certificate, which I'll get into which certificates we're proposing for which assignment. But as the recruiting tool, an officer coming from another agency who already has that certificate or who qualifies for that certificate, we would be able to give them the assignment pay sooner than under the current system. As an example, we have an officer that we hired from another agency from Campbellsville. He had a number of years there and already qualified for some career development certificates. He will not qualify for advanced police officer until 2013. However, under this system, he would qualify now essentially because he has the certificates. This would allow us to recruit the certified officers and dispatchers because a lot of times once an officer is established in a community, they may want to work for an agency like Bowling Green, but because they have wives and children, they can't afford to make the temporary pay cut. I was an example of that. I came here, I was a supervisor at another agency, and the best career move I've ever made was come into the city of Bowling Green. I'll tell you that in private or in a public meeting. But at the time, I didn't have a wife or children, and I could afford to take the temporary pay cut. With a system like this, it would be much more attractive to those officers who do have a wife and children and can't really afford to take the temporary pay cut. Also, what we're proposing is that no harm would come to the current employees. They would be able to choose either path that would get them the advanced police officer, master police officer, or advanced communication dispatcher the quickest. It would also not change the current advanced police officers or master police officers. So if they've already got the APO and MPO, that wouldn't change. They could still pursue these certificates just to have them, but they would not necessarily have to keep their pay. We presented this proposal to the employee committee. I also discussed it with all the shifts and dispatch, and we had no negative feedback about the system that we're looking at. The proposed changes: to achieve APO, MPO, and advanced communication dispatcher, an employee must be off probation and achieve the corresponding career development certificate. It would still require the chief's approval and city manager's approval. The tracks that we're looking at 2 tracks for APO and 2 tracks for MPO. The track that we're looking at for APO is the Intermediate Law Enforcement Officer Certificate and the Law Enforcement Officer Investigator Certificate. We wanted to give 2 tracks in the event that an officer early in their career gets assigned to criminal investigations. A lot of their training is going to be in the investigative realm, and therefore they may want to choose the investigator track. But if an officer has been a police officer for several years and they've been working toward this Intermediate Law Enforcement Officer track, and then they get assigned to criminal investigations, they could still remain on the Intermediate Law Enforcement track for APO purposes. They would not have to switch over to the investigator. That just gives them that option. That's a little what Mr. Bolt has already gone over, so unless you have questions specifically, I'll skip through that one. But here compares the career development to the points-based system that we currently have for the advanced police officer. Intermediate law enforcement officer to APO, 2 to 8 years based on education. As you saw on that matrix, the 8 years is really going to be the exception. The only way an officer is going to come to us and not get an APO sooner than 8 years is if they come to us with 0 college and they pursue 0 college education once they get here, and they take the bare minimum of training each year, the minimum 40 hours. It could progress out to 8 years. They have to meet the POP standards and the 96 technical, 64 human. I've done a little bit of math, and that can be accomplished in 4 years if they come to us with no college. If they take advantage of the college credit that's given to them for the police academy, and if they take at least 1 college class per semester while they're here, and if they get at least 1 40-hour in-service class during that 4-year period. That corresponds to our current system of they must be here 4 years and achieve 15 points. And the points are awarded for special assignments, education, and years of service. The special assignments, there's a long list of them, but things like critical response team, motorcycle unit, investigations, that kind of thing can get them the points under the current system. The second track for advanced police officers, the investigator track, and again, I won't go over the specifics there, as Mr. Bolt has already covered that. But again, to compare it to the current system, if an officer chose the investigative track, he could get there, or she could get there between 4 and 12 years based on their education and their training and whether they pursued additional college. Then they have to have the prerequisite of the 80-hour criminal investigation class and the other KLEC classes that Mr. Bolt talked about. And the current APO track is the same as I mentioned a minute ago. The 2 tracks that we're looking at for master police officer are the advanced law enforcement officer and the law enforcement officer advanced investigator. Again, Mr. Bolt covered the basic requirements for the certificate. But to compare it to our current system, to achieve master police officer under our current system, you have to be here 7 years and achieve 25 points. The points are again awarded for the special assignments, education, and years of service here. The only thing that changes on the advanced law enforcement officer is the 32-hour conceptual, and that is very achievable during the 4 to 12-year period, depending on their education. The classes that we already send them to will fill those human, technical, and conceptual. As long as the officer has some purpose when they start and don't just take classes willy-nilly, it is possible, as Mr. Bolt mentioned, to take only technical classes. However, we monitor our officers' training closer than that anyway, and we would not allow an officer to get that far down the track taking only technical classes. The other MPO track is the investigator. Again, to compare, they have to have the first investigator's certificate plus the 160 hours of investigative in-service classes as defined by KLEC. And the comparison again is our current system of 7 years and 25 points. The other certificate that we're looking at is the certificate for the dispatch track, the Advanced Communications Dispatcher. That requires an intermediate telecommunicator. It requires the basic telecommunicator plus 40 hours of in-service to include customer service, team building, cultural awareness, ethics, and 16 hours of electives. Again, our current dispatchers already go for those particular classes, so that wouldn't be a huge stretch for them. Their matrix is 30 hours of college or training credits to 3 years of service, 25 to 4, 20 to 5, 15 to 6, 10 to 7, and 5 to 8. And to compare that to our current system, they could achieve it in 3 to 8 years depending on their education level and the number of courses they attend. The basic tele plus 40 hours of in-service, including 24 hours of the required courses that we mentioned on the other slide. And when you compare that to the current system, requires them to be here 6 years, achieve 20 points, which is also awarded for various assignments within dispatch, and their education level and years of service. So they could achieve it in as few as 3. It could take them as long as 8. But most of these that I've looked at, individual officers' transcripts and so forth, with the officers and the dispatchers, are going to all hit about what we already do with the advanced police officer and the master police officer. A few will probably achieve it a little bit sooner. A few may achieve it a little bit later, but it's all going to come in about the same time, which right now is 4 years for APO and 7 years for MPO, or 6 years for ACD. And to summarize, the current APO, MPO, and ACD was a good plan, but it needs revision. The state's career development is a more consistent and efficient avenue to achieve our APO, MPO, and ACD. Current employees like the proposed plan, and current employees would have the option to use the old plan or the new one. I zipped through mine a little quickly because it sounded like you had most of mine hammered out in the questions, but I'll be glad to answer any questions I can.
You have a question?
You got any follow-ups?
He did good.
All right.
No, I don't have any follow-up. Thank you.
So if the current employees can choose either plan, am I correct to assume that any new employees would not be offered the old plan, and the old plan would eventually disappear through attrition?
Yes, sir. Our proposal would be whatever date, Chief, and you choose, but July 1.
Okay.
To say anyone hired after that. And that would also give us the opportunity, we can lay this out for them in pre-academy training and say this is what you need to achieve the next level.
Only question.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank you, Major Hyde. Appreciate that.
At this point, we really would like some feedback from you all to give us some direction on where we would like to go with the proposed plan. If you have any concerns about that, we'd like to address those concerns. But if you don't have any concerns, we would like to move forward with that and implement this plan as of July 1st.
I think it's been mentioned, obviously, when Chief Raymer was here, how that program was ahead of its time, and he deserves credit for his leadership in that role. And Mr. Bolt, this program, of course, it's been around for a good little while, but I think that this is a good route to go, and I can't see any downside, and if you're supportive of it, then I think it's fine.
We are, and as Major Haddon mentioned, and one of the key points I think for us was getting the support of our current employees, and to a person there is no downside from their perspective. As a matter of fact, when we announced that we were even considering this, and I think Major Hyde would attest to this, there were a number of our officers that went ahead, that were already eligible for a number of these certificates, and went ahead and pursued those. So I think that it is, it really is a good way for us to encourage the officers to pursue education in a thoughtful way, and pursue training in a thoughtful way, and achieve these career goals. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Chief. We appreciate that. I think we're all on board. Mr. Febo, the next one.
The next item is just by way of information, just as fingerprints have transformed the whole nature of forensic investigation, it appears today that the new frontier is the use of another technology, computers, for both finding criminals and also being used by criminals. Doug has been approached about an exciting collaboration to create a cyber forensic capability here in Bowling Green, and involving a nascent evolution of a variety of different partners, including WKU, our agency, and possibly the state. The other lab, as you know, is in Louisville, and we're hoping to have a closer nexus for cyber investigation. I think Doug is going to do some introductions, and we're going to move forward, but it is an exciting day, and I think it's very apropos given the nature of police investigations today.
Again, thank you for allowing us to be here to discuss this. We believe that this is one of the frontiers of law enforcement and how we investigate crime. To give you a little bit of background, a number of years ago, we've all lived through the age of digital technology. We've all grown up or adopted digital technology by way of computers, most of us have adopted it, by way of computers, by way of cell phones, by way of now iPads and all the different pad options that there are. And really, as a society, we have become very digitally oriented. To that end, a number of years ago, really before law enforcement had the financial ability to address it, we had some federal partners that provided us some equipment early on in our efforts to develop our own digital forensics lab. And we have been partnering for a number of years with the Secret Service, who's provided us some equipment to do what we have been talking about. But as this commission knows, both in last year's budget and in the upcoming proposed budget, we are making our own effort to develop a fully comprehensive digital forensics lab within the Bowling Green Police Department, because there is that much demand in this field, and we're finding that there is really digital technology attached to so many of our criminal cases now that it's really become incumbent upon us to have that function internally in order just to meet demand of our own investigative needs. But what really is I think the next frontier, and one of the reasons that we see a value in the partnering with WKU is they have and I will say this admittedly, a higher level of technological savvy at Western Kentucky University than we would have at the Bowling Green Police Department across the board. Now, obviously, we have some very highly skilled technical people in our digital forensics area, but we want to take advantage of other people's both intelligence, but also their ability to possess the technology to evaluate the digital world as well. And so through some relationships that some of our staff has had with some members of the Cyber Defense Lab at Western Kentucky University, and I take very little credit in developing this relationship, and frankly very little responsibility in bringing us to where we are today. Mike Lemon, a detective who's specially trained in digital forensics with our criminal investigations, through relationships that he's had with some members of the cyber defense lab team, came up with the idea of partnering not only to help us do what we would like to do better in terms of digital forensics, but also expand that capability to regionally to this part of the state. And Dr. Gordon Bayless is here representing Western Kentucky University with some members of his staff as well. And I will let him introduce those folks. But I think it's exciting that Western, with partnering with us, may ultimately have the ability to provide to outlying agencies, not just the Bowling Green Police Department, but some other agencies who may not have the financial or technical ability to have the in-house capability of digital forensics. I think Western Kentucky University is seeking ways to provide that to other regional agencies, and we support that. We know that that's a demand from other police agencies, and if we can help in doing that, we're certainly on board with that. There's also within this partnership the opportunity for us to provide some real-life experience for Western students who can come and work with our technical staff, who can see how digital forensics works in the real world, who we can assist in preparing them to help other law enforcement agencies in the future, and we're excited about that as well. I don't pretend to know all the ins and outs of the technology. That's frankly what other people are trained and paid to do. And so I think what I want to do is invite Dr. Bayless up to talk about their vision of what this partnership will provide. And then if you have any questions either on the technical side or how the Bowling Green Police Department will play into that partnership, we also have Detective Michael Lemon here to answer some of those questions as well. But that being said, I would like to invite Dr. Gordon Bayless to the podium, please.
Well, thank you. And thank you very much, Doug, but I'm not really a technical guy in this area. If you want to know about brain damage, I can talk about it. That's my own particular area of expertise. I'm in charge of all of the research at WKU, and luckily we do have the experts here. We have Melinda Whitfield and Phil Womble, who are in the Cyber Defense Lab, who really know this highly technical area. And they have a long history of working against the bad guys in the defense arena, right? Because it's very clear that a lot of the warfare that's going on out there nowadays is cyber warfare, and they're in the front line defending us against the bad guys. And we think this is a natural partnership to use that expertise to defend us against the other sense of the bad guys, the criminals. And we've also got with us Ed Tivell, who's a long-standing partner in Electronic Warfare Associates. Again, they've worked in this defense arena. But I think Phil is probably the best person, Dr. Phil Womble, to give an overview of the technical approach that we're going to be doing here. But what I would say is this is a high priority for WKU. We're putting resources behind it. We believe in this, and we think this is where this kind of partnership with a real world need is what WKU needs to be doing, and so we stand absolutely behind it.
Thank you, Dr. Bayless.
Dr. Womble.
Good afternoon. Feel free to interrupt me with questions at any time that you might have about this. The WKU Cyber Defense Lab was founded about 2007. It was a natural outgrowth of some of our work in the Department of Defense cyber and computer network defense areas. Our staff has been working against various threats, computer threats, and one of the things that we are wanting to do is take some of this technology, some of the things that we've learned on that side of the fight, and bring them down to essentially down to the police level, if we can. If you think about it, what's happening, some of these computer criminals, they started out as being part of some national defense agencies. Some of the more successful ones were possibly from other things, from other countries, and got laid off and had to go out into the world and try to find a niche. And what they did, of course, is they started to use their powers against folks like Detective Lemon over here and against our citizens. And so we see this as a natural effort, an evolutionary effort for us to move forward and to develop these concepts, to work with the Bowling Green Police Department. We're very excited about this. We think it's an opportunity not only to help Detective Lemon and his staff, but also to train our students or educate our students in this area. We've already discussed with Detective Lemon some of his desires with regards to certain computer programs and applications that he would like to see developed, that he thinks would be very effective or in helping him do his job better. But that's essentially where we're coming from. And again, we're very excited about the possibility of this relationship going forward. And thank you for your time.
Can I ask, can you give us an example of something that you would do? Because it's a little bit beyond my understanding.
Give an example
of some type of criminal activity that you would help.
Well, one of the things that Detective Lemon mentioned to us is a forensics tool to where an officer who doesn't have all the advanced training that we saw up here, who's relatively inexperienced, can simply take to a laptop or computer, plug it in, and then it automatically run through a number of already set tools and look through for whatever evidence that is necessary, just as a first level search. Because you can imagine that a computer is a very complex instrument. You can hide data wherever. So one of the things that we're contemplating is something that you just put it into the computer like a USB key, and it goes through, looks for certain key signatures, looks for certain keywords, perhaps file names, perhaps looks at where websites have visited, and then compiles that into something that the officer can see very quickly and very readily without having to do all the searches himself. So it allows them to do a sort of a triage of computers or set of computers. Because now when you go into anyone's home, you don't find one computer like in the old days. You find a plethora of computers. And I'm talking about not just the laptops or desktops. I'm talking about cell phones. I'm talking about iPads, a number of digital devices. So all these could contain evidence of criminal activity. And it's difficult for someone coming into that getting a handle on it. And Detective Lemon has said to us, can you help in this? And we're trying to see what we can do to bring some of our skills together in that area.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Do your services relate to state crimes or international crimes? Stopping foreign persons either for profit or political machinations to harm our country?
If you were, I have to be somewhat careful. If you were interested in for us to take a look at traffic coming in or to monitor or something like that, that's our forte. Our forte is defense. We don't go outside of it. We can, if you said for us to look at a stream of traffic and make sure that no bad guys were getting in, that's our forte. But we also, for that, to learn how to do that, we know how to do the opposing thing. We learned the black arts so we can learn the good arts, right? That's the way your training always is. So with that regard is that we could indeed help if there was something, for example, if you were, if there was some sort of persistent a threat, or if there was someone who's trying to break into your systems all the time, we could help you find that out. If you wanted us to help you secure systems, we can help you on that as well. If there was you're worried about break-in or something like that, we can help you on that. We've been trained on both sides of the fence on that regard.
Anyone else?
I think it's an exciting opportunity.
Yes.
I'm glad it's coming to fruition.
Thank you, Dr. Womble.
Mm-hmm. The only thing I would add or offer is if you have any questions of Detective Mike Lemon, who might envision it from our side of that equation on how that relationship would benefit us as well. But I think we've talked about that a little bit, but I certainly would welcome him to come up and talk about that a little bit.
Good evening. Since 2008, the Bowling Green Police Department has had a fully functional computer lab of some sort. We've been able to do computers and more recently cell phones as well, if not better than anyone else in the state, I believe. Detective Tim Wilson and myself received over probably 1,000 hours of training in the last 3 years. And I think we're good at what we do, but in the end, we're cops. We're not computer people. We're learning about computers, whereas the Cyber Defense Lab, they've got the knowledge, they've got the tools that we could only even dream to have. So I think the partnership, which Phil talked about a little bit, I think the benefits for the Bowling Green Police Department is the increased level of abilities that people like myself, Detective Wilson, to more fully examine computers, have better abilities to complete examinations, but also for the patrolmen, for the other detectives, and even not for just Bowling Green Police Department, but sharing this knowledge with others in this region to have that ability, to raise the knowledge of your average basic patrolman up to the point to where they understand computer crimes, they understand how to investigate it, and they have at least a basic set of tools when they go into a house and if it's a registered sex offender that they feel like maybe going places they shouldn't be on the internet, or if they believe it's a child pornography case or a child abuse case, whatever it is, they have the ability at least to do a basic, what we call triage examination, and that can start the ball rolling for further examinations.
Any questions? Thank you, Detective.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And the last comment is, and I think we present this to you only to receive your blessing moving forward again on this project. We're excited about it. Truly, I believe that it will probably go in directions we have yet to imagine in terms of what technology we're going to explore, what skills they're going to bring to the table that can help us. And honestly, all law enforcement, I envision this to be to have a pretty broad application in the law enforcement profession as we progress in our work down this road. So we're excited about it, and we hope you're excited about it as well.
I think Mike said it best. You know, at the very end of the day, we're still police officers, and there's such expertise available to us. I think it's a great symbiotic relationship that we can have, and I appreciate Dr. Bayless and all the crew to help us out with this. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Anything else, Mr. DeFebo?
No, that's all, Mayor.
Anything from the body? We'll close the work session and return at 7 p.m. for a regular session.